Heavenly Sword was one of the first games that I purchased on my PlayStation 3. To summarise what it is, it's a fast-paced hack-and-slash adventure that shares a lot of its combat elements with something like the old-school God of War series. The game features a strong female protagonist called Nariko, who has stunning long red hair, and her friend Kai, whose erratic nature leads you to believe that she may be suffering from some mental health issues. From time to time I find my thoughts drifting back to Heavenly Sword, wondering why we never got a sequel to this game, and certain games that have come out since have actually triggered my memory to think about this Ninja Theory classic, and I started thinking about it a hell of a lot more during my playthrough of Horizon Zero Dawn and Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, with the possible trigger being the striking similarities and appearances between the three games' protagonists. However, while doing my research for this video looking at all the history, I realised that my links between the three games might not be as superficial as I once thought. Hello everybody, I'm Roy McCoy, and welcome to my latest video, and this time we're asking that question: what happened to Heavenly Sword? And in this video I'll be looking at what it was, the development, the release, what went wrong, and inevitably asking that all-important question: could we ever see a sequel or a remake? And please remember to smash that like button, as it really helps the video to do well. And if you do enjoy these trips down memory lanes looking at series that have seemingly disappeared, please consider subscribing. But now, let's talk about the interesting history of Heavenly Sword. So, as I mentioned, this was one of the first games that I bought on my PlayStation 3, and in fact it came out early in the console's life cycle, releasing in 2007. The game was developed by Ninja Theory and published and funded by Sony Computer Entertainment, which means that this was indeed a PlayStation 3 exclusive. The game features a whole heap of talent, with people like Andy Serkis and Steven Berkoff working on the acting and voices, and even featuring Rhianna Pratchett, daughter of Terry Pratchett, among the writing credits. The game has strong hack-and-slash combat mechanics and is an action-adventure. And as I said in the introduction, features a strong female protagonist with long red hair, who wields a weapon called Heavenly Sword. The game also features a second playable character, who is Kai, also female, and seemingly suffers from some kind of mental health issue, which is an interesting point that I will be focusing on later when I talk about the future of Ninja Theory. Nariko, the protagonist, was born in the year that a prophesized divine warrior was due to return, but due to the fact she was female, her clan didn't believe in her and saw her as a foreshadowing of failure. And basically she rises up and wields once more this legendary weapon called the Heavenly Sword that can be used in different ways, like on a chain for example, depending on which stance Nariko is in. When you take control of Kai, it's usually more of a kind of sniping mission or long-range mission where you take out enemies with crossbows. There's also a healthy amount of quick-time event. The story itself is quite interesting. It's the classic tale of prophesized warrior versus tyrant. And the tyrant, of course, is voiced by Andy Serkis. Development for the game began in 2002 and wasn't originally planned to be a PlayStation exclusive. However, Sony picked up the rights, and after 5 years of development, the game was produced and released in 2007 on PlayStation 3. It still holds a score of 79 on Metacritic. People enjoyed the combat, the fast-paced, the story, the themes, and the graphics, while the main criticism was levied at the fact that it was only single player, and also the fact that the game was short. So that's basically what the game was, and I still have a fond place in my heart for this game. Even though it wasn't the greatest thing I've ever played, some reason it draws me back. However, what went wrong? Why did we not get that follow-up to Heavenly Sword? Well, the game originally shipped 1 million copies, with some people claiming the number was as high as 1.5 million. And in fact, the game was originally written as a trilogy, with the original developers confirming the script for the second game had already been written. However, the developer didn't manage to break even on the project, which is possibly, sadly, the main reason that we never saw or haven't yet seen a sequel to Heavenly Sword. Because at the end of the day, as much as we love it, video games are an industry, they are a business. Possibly a reason that it didn't sell overly well originally is because it was released early on in the PlayStation 3's life cycle. And of course the PlayStation 3 not only was difficult to develop and code for, it was also released at a very expensive price, which means that not many people had this console when the game was released, meaning that the target audience wasn't as big as the developer would have liked, so it's quite possible that by the time a lot of people purchased the PlayStation 3, Heavenly Sword was a pretty old game, and from memory this game never even got trophy support, which shows just how old this title is. So that is a factor that really worked against it. Fundamentally, the game was well received and it was a good game, but possibly just released at the wrong time. But it is safe to say that at this point it was very much in the plans of Ninja Theory. However, at this point I need to say that the IP, that the rights to Heavenly Sword, were and still are held by Sony. So let's first of all talk about what happened to Ninja Theory. They moved on to make other games, including a title called Enslaved, Odyssey to the West in 2010, DMC Devil May Cry, and a little bit later in 2017, Hellblade Senua's Sacrifice, which is interesting because at the start of this video I said that the two characters shared a lot in common in terms of visuals and looks, and also those titles. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to work out the similarities or the contrast between the names Heavenly Sword and Hellblade. However, in an interview in 2014 between Dominic Matthews of Ninja Theory and Eurogamer, Ninja Theory said, "Don't call Hellblade Heavenly Sword 2. In fact, they managed to make a series of comments distancing any link between the two games. Now, as I said, not just the name for me had that subtle link, but the look of the character. And what's interesting is that Ninja Theory in this game explored that idea of mental health issues. If you haven't played Hellblade, it's a phenomenally interesting game that has a strong female protagonist, a lot of good gameplay, and some really interesting storytelling that focuses and looks at mental health. Which is why initially I linked it to Kai. Kai was that character from Heavenly Sword whose erratic nature made you wonder if she did have some mental health issues. And not only that, the look of Senua makes you wonder if she was influenced by Kai. In fact, let's have a look at those two characters together. It's safe to say at this moment, due to what the developer has said, that Hellblade and Heavenly Sword are not linked. However, any chances of Ninja Theory working on a Heavenly Sword 2 seems to have been scuppered, as they were bought by Xbox Game Studios in 2018, which means that it's highly unlikely that an exclusive title with Sony would be developed by an Xbox studio. But let's track back a little bit from Ninja Theory and go back to Heavenly Sword, because you might also be aware that there was at some point a Heavenly Sword 2 in development. In 2008, a developer started work on Heavenly Sword 2. However, it was not Ninja Theory. Instead, the development duties fell to SCE Cambridge in the UK. However, shortly after the game went into development, Sony pulled the plug, most likely down to the fact that they didn't see the game as commercially viable. And now any chance of that studio working on a sequel, or ever working on Heavenly Sword 2, is scuppered, as the studio was later closed down. However, there are a couple more twists in the tale, as long before the studio got shut down, in 2010, SCE Studio Cambridge was changed into Guerrilla Cambridge, that acted as a sister studio to Guerrilla Games. Who are Guerrilla Games? Well, they're the developers of Horizon Zero Dawn. Now, any chances of Studio Cambridge or Guerrilla Cambridge ever working on a Heavenly Sword 2 are pretty much gone, as the studio itself was closed down in 2017. But what is pretty interesting is that link I made at the start, the look of Aloy and the look of Nariko, and the fact that the studios, the properties, actually went into the same melting pot in the end. And I do wonder, there's nothing to say that it is, but I do wonder if there's a slight link between the two looks of the characters. Let's put all three of them up here. Nariko, Senua, and Aloy. And there is a similarity. There is a family resemblance. You could quite happily imagine that they come as cousins from the same family. And while I don't think it's a successor or a sequel, I do think that somehow that the character design of Aloy might have somehow been a little bit influenced by Nariko. It is quite interesting. Now, it could be a massive coincidence. Let's put it down to coincidence. But in the back of my mind, I kind of feel justified that when I played Horizon Zero Dawn, my memory slipped back to Heavenly Sword. I kind of feel there's a justification with that weak and tenuous link in my mind. So that's pretty much it, but I did promise you there was another little twist, and that is because in 2012, concept art for Heavenly Sword 2 was leaked, and it showed Nariko once more back fighting in what looks like a desert. So you can see there's probably no real connection between Ninja Theory's Senua and indeed Horizon Zero Dawn. So, could we see a sequel to Heavenly Sword? Well, in fact, in 2014, we did get an animated film of Heavenly Sword that starred the original actress Anna Trov as Nariko, and this time Alfred Molina took over the character as King Bohan, who was originally played by Andy Serkis. And of course the character of Nariko also popped up in PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale in 2012. But apart from that, the cancelled sequel, the film, and the occasional appearance, we haven't really had much from Heavenly Sword. So, as I said, could we see a sequel? Could we see a remake? And it is possible. Sony still own the rights. They have the studios that are capable of making it, but at the end of the day, this game is 13 years old. And quite possibly now, there are other games, other sequels, other series that would do better. And Sony possibly don't trust the commercial viability of bringing a 13-year-old property back that wasn't an overly whelming amazing seller back for a sequel when there are other games to be made. So as much as I would love to see a sequel to this game, I'm not convinced it's going to happen. I wouldn't be shocked if it did. Only 6 years ago there was a film, and stranger things have happened, but personally, I'm not holding my breath on this one. Well, that brings me to the end of this video. I hope you've enjoyed that. Let me know any other games that you would like me to cover in my What Happened To series. But for today, this is Roy McCoy, out!